Why would I not honor what's true for me and what I truly desire? And just because society says I should, stop being a victim. Put your big girl panties on. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Let's see, feel, and hear each other, because we're at a point now where women aren't even listening to each other. No matter what a man does, no matter what's going on, she doesn't deviate from who she is. That's what this story's about. And women are attacking the movie left and right, and I'm having like a nervous breakdown over it.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes. Hi, this is Sifu Slim, and we're back, and I am joined with Christina, and we're talking about female hormones. And why would we want to talk about female hormones? Well, I have a philosophy, and I hope it doesn't come across as a preachy philosophy, because my destiny and my desire is to bring humankind, animal kind, all the planet, all of us together with some kind of harmony. I'd like to see this thing work for our betterment and for happiness and for sustainability and all those lovely things. So how do I tap into this? Well, when I looked into female hormones, you know, I was a young dude in high school, and then I stayed in contact with my French teacher, and I still do. And she was young and attractive. She was like 25, 27 when I had her in my as a high school teacher, and all of us students thought she was great. And she was very intellectually gifted and attractive and fun to be around. And we stayed in contact. And one day when I was going through some female woes, and that hadn't been the first time, believe you me, and it's probably not, they're saying it's not the first time they went through man woes with me, but I said, you know, what is this thing with women being high maintenance? And I said, you know, can't they just get what they want, do what they want, and be happy? What is this maintenance thing? And she said, you're going to have to grow up and learn that all women are high maintenance. When she said that, I said, oh my gosh, I have to learn about females. So how am I going to do that? Well, my contention is that this happened automatically in tribal living. Why? Because you're around elders, female, male elders. You're around all ages. You get to see kids being born all the way to people dying, and you see it on a regular basis, and you see how this works. And so that's my contention, is you understand because you grew up in it. When you grew up in a busy world of going to sports, doing your chores, running off to school, after school jobs and sports, and then hanging out with your friends, you see it, but it often comes at a distance, and you're often in the modern era not hanging out with the elders, who they may tell you that this tribal, if you're back in the 1700s or sometime back in the tribal setting, they may say, oh, that teepee over there, that's where the women go in our particular tribe when they're on their cycle, or when they need a little bit of break in the action, and they go and they bond, and their hormones tend to regulate and be at the same level of all the women in that tribe, and especially the women in that tent. They go over there and they all have their cycle. They have this wonderful downtime. They get to regroup without people bothering them and being all this demanding. So those are some of the things that I look to, and I'm going to bring in Christina to share a little bit of her perspective and see what she thinks about my tribal thing, that the young boy is going to learn about women just by being in that tribe and seeing how that operates and tapping into other more experienced people, men and women's counsel on little walks and on little talks around the fire, or when they're working with leather or wood or antlers, whatever they're working with, they can tap into that in a very natural way. Christina, introduce yourself if you would, and share what your perspective is on some of these things.
Hi, I'm Christina Marie. I'm the owner of Expanding Consciousness LLC, and I work with step families, primarily biological mothers and stepmothers. And I love everything that you're saying. And I just want to put in there something, because many, many moons ago, the reality is that men were afraid of the woman's cycle, and they told them to go away because they were afraid they were going to take away from their hunting abilities. So women were told to go away because they were dangerous. Right? And so they were actually treated less than, like, you need to go away because you're dangerous. And what the women did was they discovered that could be a time where they nourished each other and washed each other's hair, and they ate good food and they slept well. And then their desire was to come back from when their men were hunting and to be renewed, and their skin was glowing and they wanted to look good. And as soon as the men returned, they made love and it was beautiful again. So it was actually, that's the brilliance of a woman. You put her somewhere and she'll create it as a beautiful thing. And so the women all held each other, and then eventually it turned into something that people had reverence for. But the original thing was fear. It was fear-based, so I just wanted to add that to it.
Yeah, was that, are you talking about from the sense of being on your cycle, driving away the game?
Yes.
Okay. So hormones release, scent is picked up by the animals. Not that the man's scent isn't easily discerned by an animal, but I'd like to read a little bit more on that one, because that's fascinating. I hadn't heard that, but I have heard why women go to the bathroom together in the modern era. Have you heard that story?
I don't think so.
So oftentimes you go to a concert or you're in school, you see females go to the bathroom together in pairs. It does have an evolutionary context, and that is that man, when a male needs to relieve themselves and can stand and relieve themselves, they can still see over the tall grass and bushes and see any predators or enemies coming up on them, whereas a woman squatting down cannot. So they would often come and have two people so one can look and stand up, whereas the other one is down squatting.
That makes perfect sense to me. Totally logical.
Very logical. So the idea that I have on this understanding women, so I've mentioned that, and then you get along the lines to functionality. And now I think in the modern era, and I think anytime since we left the hunter-gatherer society, women have had a tough go in a certain way. And I'll share with you what that way is. I have not read this somewhere. This is something that I came up with based on some ideas that I had from just knowing history. So the transition from hunting and gathering to farming, some people have called this the worst mistake in the history of the human race. And I would agree with them. The number one reason for me is we're less communal. We become more competitive because there's more ownership when you have agriculture. And then you have the powerful person gaining control of that land. And he has so much control. It's often a male, but sometimes female. I should say that person, not just male, gets control of that land, and then he has to protect, or she has to protect that land. So they hire people who are the strong, thuggish type people to protect them. So that person starts to have the ability to have ownership of land, ownership of people, and then starts to attract females if it's a man, and have his way with a number of females. And then you have all of these workers becoming, people that are like Enochs because they don't have the power that this person does, who has all of the women, and they still want to have, you know, physical and communal relationships, maybe a partner with a woman, and they get shafted in the process. What happens to the woman in that agricultural life? Well, the very sad thing is the woman starts to become property, chattel they call this, and the woman has a child. Well, what happens when a woman has a child? Not always, but often, is the sex drive could diminish. And if the sex drive diminishes, and if this woman is being beleaguered by all of the demands of this one child, let's say it's the first child and the woman's 16 or 20 or whatever the age is, now she's got to care for this child. If the child's demanding, it could be crying, it could be having the stomach distress, it could be having whatever it is. That woman has this thing that's now, to this man who wants to sleep and have sex, a problem. And so that woman gets cast aside. And as this person, if it's a man, is cruising the fields, he finds someone 2 years younger who doesn't have any kids, who's more interested in the sex part for this, satisfying this male. And then he takes on with them. And then woman number one doesn't have the security, which is high on the list, probably the highest thing for most women that I've read in the modern era, is security. And they want many other things, but security is very high. And this woman now revolts because there's no security. So there's this huge conflict in there, which could result in physical violence, which is nasty. And this man who controls things in the land can perpetuate that by just shifting them on. And I saw this as recently as Costa Rica. A few years ago, I was there, and I saw a German man who had lots of money in his 50s going through a family of Costa Rican women who had he had girlfriends. He started with the age 27-year-old, had a kid with her, started doing the physical abuse, boom, cast her aside. Went to her younger sister, a year and a half younger, and then when I met this family, because I was looking at property down there, and this person had some property to sell, was on daughter, sister number 3, and was already abusing that person. So this is nasty stuff in the modern era. Who's going to stick up for that woman? Who's going to stop this man in his tracks? It's a tough call. So let me let you jump in. Those are some of my thoughts on what I've seen and the historical move from ownership versus communal living, communal living and more equity and shared responsibilities to more ownership of land and control of people in the agrarian society. Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, so now you're speaking on a level that, of course, as a woman, I can totally, I feel that collectively, of course, we all do, but also, I ran into a professor of the indigenous cultures, and one of the things that happened with the Indian culture was that the men who were supposed to be the outer line, they actually started getting drunk and they started killing the women. And so there's thousands of Indian women who are, they still haven't found, they don't, so what happened was something happened to the men and they broke the chain of care, right? They're supposed to protect the women and protect the children. Now in India, this has been going on for so long that when little girls are born, if the father, there was a story that the father threw the little girl in the river because she wasn't as valuable as a boy. So in every culture, we have something that goes on that where women are just, there's something there that they're treated in a certain way. Now, India is known for the goddess, but there's another more insidious thing that happens there. And so collectively, worldwide, we all feel this on some level, and we all pick up on this. Now, there's a documentary that I love, and it's for men, actually. It's called The Mask You're In, The Mask You're Living In. And it talks about how little boys are conditioned very early, and usually by their fathers, to stop crying, be a man. Stop crying, be a man. In other words, don't have a heart, don't be a whole human being because it's not manly. And this documentary is brilliant because it takes, because I love women. I love my sisterhood. It's like most meaningful to me, but there's not a lot to help men. And men need the help, So this documentary was beautiful in terms of being able to articulate where it begins. It's not the locker room in high school. It's the the moment your father feels uncomfortable and you're only a 5-year-old little boy and you're crying and he says, stop crying, that's where it begins, where men start. And then that little boy who can't cry gets angry when his hormones kick in, and then it just progresses from there. So it's not enough to talk about female hormones if we're going to talk to that. It's also to talk to, from a society level, and our fathers and what they teach boys. And as a mother of a son, I have had moments with my son where I was like, they're going to make fun of you if you are a whole person. And I even felt that, not know what to do or how to handle something from a society standpoint. So, and I am like, you know, my son growing up, I'm like, mommy's PMSing. Here's what happens. This is what it means. So if I yell at you, it's not about you. It's not personal. I promise you I love you, blah, blah, blah. And my son and I had an engagement where he would say, Mommy, are you PMSing? And I'd say, yeah. He's like, well, you're doing really good. You didn't yell at me once. Like, so he's connected to the feminine in that way. And I really didn't want him to hate women. You know, I didn't want him to think that my energy and the fact that I lost a child and I didn't know how to handle it or whatever else was going on in my life had anything to do with him. You know, and so I was very open with him about that. And I don't know that mothers are doing that or not. I don't think they are.
So he sensed it, he acknowledged it, you acknowledged it, and then he gave you a nice reward for being the best you could be at that time, and that's a nice kudo from a young person.
Yeah, he gave me, yeah, for my good behavior.
I think we all need hugs and kudos for our good behavior. I mean, I think that's wonderful acknowledgement. And I wish we had more of that. We're in the society, as you said, we're taught not to show our emotions, not to show the hand that we're playing, because we keep this deck of cards, or the hand we've been dealt. They used to say, breast your cards back in the day, so nobody could see the hand that you're playing, so you could win the game or the gambling. And so that's interesting. That's part of the way I grew up, was don't share too much, and that's not who I am. I'm this open person. Coach, I want you to know my operating system. I want to know your operating system, and then we can work to mutually benefit whatever activity we're in and wherever we want to go with this, and we can help each other through life. But it's such a nasty world in many respects, because we're pounding each other and pulling the rug out from each other to trip each other up, to take what the other person has, or sometimes just because we're insecure in this whole thing, we want to make that other person feel more insecure than we are, less secure, and then we somehow get a little step up. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I call that the hammer or the heart. In each situation, we're deciding we can either use our heart or we could use our hammer. And we all have a hammer and a heart, because we all live in this world. And so I feel like I'm like you. I want to be in this energy. I want to be in the win-win, and I'm willing to find out what that is and what the path may be, because I don't know. I'm only bringing my part. I can't know someone else unless I really take the time to know them. And that's actually a very big part of my work. And the thing that upsets me about the mainstream work is that in order to really help a woman, you have to know where she is in her story, because a woman in her story that's unhealed has a certain vibration. A woman who is just raw and fresh and is just looking at herself differently and maybe loving herself for the first time ever, her story has a different vibration. And if you're really present, you can feel where a woman is in her story, but you have to give her presence and reverence and time to share herself, to feel safe. And when she does that, and she does that, and she does that, that's how she heals. But in our culture, we are, oh my God, you're such a victim. Boom, stop being a victim. Put your big girl panties on. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's see, feel, and hear each other, because we're at a point now where women aren't even listening to each other. We can't even get to men, what men are doing, because we're doing it to each other. And it's really sad. There's a new Wonder Woman movie out, and it is phenomenal. It is so good. And it's not about a beautiful woman in a hot outfit. It's not about women who fight. It's about a woman who is pristine in her integrity and her belief system. And she doesn't deviate. No matter what a man does, no matter what's going on, she doesn't deviate from who she is. That's what this story is about. And women are attacking the movie left and right, and I'm having like a nervous breakdown over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we have done that enough. We have done that enough. You know?
The professor who wrote the article back in 1988 is Jared Diamond of UCLA. He's in his late 70s, early 80s now. And he wrote The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race. And I encourage everyone to Google that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And there are many good interviews done by Jared Diamond on tribal people that he's lived with in the 20th century. And that doesn't mean, he says, or other people don't have major disagreements, but he's very well spoken. He speaks 15 languages and growing. And he gives you, he knows the story of the disappearance of civilizations as well as anyone I've listened to. And I encourage you to do that. Now I'm going to type in his needs, see if I can find this, his needs. I can't find it. I'll look it up in a second. But there's a book called His Needs, Her Needs, and that's about the 5 things that are priorities on the women's needs, and then the 5 that are the top needs for men, and not one item is on the other person's list. And when a girlfriend handed me that book, I couldn't believe it. And I said, my gosh, how did I not ever get told about this along the way? I was like 50 when I was handed this book, or 49. And I said, oh my goodness. And so what happened to me along the way is I never got that clue. And I'm sure that I'm not uncommon. I'm a pretty good listener. I go to lots of conferences, watch a lot of YouTube videos, and read a lot of books. How did I miss that along the way? Any ideas on that, Christina?
Well, I just think that's fabulous. I just think that's great. Who cares if you're 50? At least you're like, oh, now I get it, right? So yeah, I want to share with you this book. It's called 2 Steps, and it's an incredibly brilliant book because it's really just, it's all illustrations. It's very simple. It's like a children's book, but the content is incredible. And it talks about, it's the 2-step, it's the dance towards intimacy. And it talks about seeker versus sought. So you're either seeking or you're being sought. Like you're either the hot one everybody wants, or you're the one, or you're seeking the hot one. And it talks about the dance and how we're all dancing. And you could be lesbian, you could be straight, you could be anything. It could be your parent-child, it could be your friends, siblings, anything. It talks about how someone's always seeking and someone's always being sought, and how to do that dance. And I really love this book. It's from like 1992. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. 2 Step. You see it? Yeah. So yeah, I've just recently started. I actually found this because, you know, here in Hawaii, people just leave books and they say free, and it just hit me, and I said, oh, this is cute, and I opened it up and I started reading it, and it's quite brilliant in its simplicity, but it's packed with power, and you really get to understand who you are, how you've been handling yourself in connections, why people run, why people want, like, it's just, I love it.
I found the other book, so thank you for sharing that one. The other one's a Minnesota psychologist who had practiced at the time I read his book for some 35 years. Now, you're in Minnesota. This is a little sociological context, and I grew up in New Jersey. Not as cold as Minnesota, but a lot of indoor living where you're forced to be in each other's midst a lot. If you're retired, you're inside and you're in each other's hair, so to speak, all the time. So Dr. Willard Harley wrote this book, His Needs, Her Needs, and it's about loving relationships. So I'll share you a couple of needs. So these are his needs. Sexual fulfillment, number 1, recreational companionship, an attractive spouse, domestic support, admiration. So those are the top 5 for men. And now switching over to the women, number 1, affection, number 2, conversation, number 3, honesty and openness, number 4, financial commitment, number 5, family commitment. So there's some security in both of those. And then the affection also provides that, you know, you're there, you're connected. So that's also a security type thing. So I thought those were great. And the reason he distilled that down to 5 is because after seeing some 10,000 people, he said, wait a minute, they're all coming in with the same problems. Why don't I distill this down and show them these 5 things, and we'll work on these, and we'll work on the other things that are not on this list as well. But if you can get these 5 right on each side, you've got a very good striking ratio for having a relationship that will function on a daily basis. Any thoughts on that?
My first thought is that the 1 and 2 on the men's list is actually my top 2 priorities. And I'll tell you why, because I'm not looking for, I already have my children, I already have my marriages, I'm in midlife, my priorities are different. And so there's this great book that expands on what you're saying. It's called The Goddess in Everyday Women. And it's Carl Jung meets the goddesses, the methodology and all that stuff, Greek goddesses, all that stuff. And it talks about how each woman is different, and like maybe even each decade we change, we evolve. Like, you know, sometimes we're in mother mode, which is Demeter, and sometimes we're Aphrodites, and sometimes it depends on what's going on and how we were raised. There's a lot to it. But what I love about this book is that it doesn't matter what kind of woman you are, be that, you can embody that goddess fully and develop it. And then when you're feeling like you're short on one end, you can develop those things if you want to. So I used it in my work because I'm trying to help women see that we're not all alike. We don't all want the same things. We don't all make good mothers. Some of us don't even know we don't even want to be a mom until after we have babies. And then we're like, we don't know what we're doing. So, and you don't know that if you're raised in a culture that says you're supposed to have a child. And if you're a woman who's like, I don't want children, and you end up having a child, there's a problem, right? So, so the expansion on that, it's like the 5 love languages, you know, and it goes deeper into what you were just saying. It's like physical affection can be sex, or it can just be holding hands. So it goes into more detail there. So I agree with what you're saying, and I like his work. I like his work from a baseline, but I did hear, and I'm like, I just had this experience with a gentleman because I am single, and my emotional honesty about how important sex is to me was like, whoa, whoa, what kind of woman are you? And I'm like, because I'm like, you know, like as if that means I don't have integrity around it, you know, like, as if I can hold a container around it, as if I'm just loosey-goosey and stuff like that. And so I'm not saying that's the sensation that I got, like I'm supposed to want to be proper and wait, and you know, and I asked myself, why would I not honor what's true for me and what I truly desire? And just because society says I should, I mean, my physiology is telling me enjoy orgasm because it'll keep you young. And I'm like, okay, you know, so it's been a thing. So it's interesting you said that.
Yeah, what you just shared about your on button was echoed in that letter that I sent you, that article by the runway model, who she said when she approached people in Paris, you know, at a very high youth and beauty level, and was attracted to someone on the dance floor, she went up to them and was a little bit forward. They ran. They didn't know how to handle this because there was no pickup. There was no man having to do certain things. There was a woman, Korsakova, what is her name?
You just did. It was a great article, by the way.
I'm looking to see if I can see it. Elena Porsakova, who's from the Czech Republic, I think, lived in Sweden for a time, and then went to Paris and then New York, and shares her experiences. So look at her her letter about in her book. She just published a book recently. It's about how dealt with being beautiful and having her female makeup be treated so differently in every country that she went to.
Yeah, it's true. It depends on what country you're from. And she even says America started to make her Swedish. I think she's from Sweden, yeah.
Maybe she was living in Sweden for a while.
Yeah, so her Sweden confidence went down. It started to wilt when she was in America. And so that's how she was forced to become a feminist because she was losing her center.
Yeah.
Which
yeah,
I think is a very powerful message.
That's fascinating. And people don't know how to handle differences. You know, the whole idea of change making people uncomfortable. I love change. I love new cultures. I love new lands. I love new books. I love new museum exhibitions. Love new. But a lot of people like consistency and things that they're comfortable with, and don't move on to new experiences as readily. So the one woman commented on a blog about feminism. I sent you a video of Christopher Hitchens commenting on female comedians, and I encourage everyone to watch that, and I'll put the links under this specific YouTube video. But this comment from this blogger says that too many women are stuck on the idea that equality implies sameness. Hitch, aka Christopher Hitchens, wasn't the slightest bit sexist. It's so upsetting to think that anyone might brand him that way because they misunderstand him here. And so you and I happen to watch that same one where he comments that women don't have to be funny, therefore that translates into less female humor in society. Not that women aren't funny, but they don't have to be as funny as men do, he says, in order to get some action from the female side.
Yeah, I have to thank you for sending me that, because when I like something, I research it to death. And I actually came across another video, and it was an older video, and he was much younger, very charming, very respectful, very gentlemanly. And he was the woman, and I think this must have been in the 90s, because that was when feminism was like really bullying, you know? And so, so the woman, he was saying about his feelings, his actual family values was that, you know, he would want his wife to stay home when he got married. He wasn't even married at the time. He would, because he feels women are better nurturers for the children. So when they had children, he would want her to stay home. He said, but if she wanted to work, I would support that too. I want her to be happy. And this woman ripped him apart. She said, you're a sexist. I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, he is more for women than this woman was. I was like, I couldn't even believe it with my own eyes. I was so upset, because that's actually what I teach with breastfeeding mothers and bottle feeding mothers and working mothers and stay-at-home mothers. It doesn't matter, as long as the woman is happy with what she's doing. That's what's going to make her a good mother. Not if she stays home, not if she works, but if she's fulfilled. It's a fulfilled mother who loves herself, who knows how to nurture her children. Either way. So I'm constantly... So yeah, so that's just so fun. So I researched him and what happened to his mother, and I really thought, you know, I think he liked to live on the edge a little bit, and I think he was purposely, intentionally digging women a little bit for not listening, you know. But ultimately, I really had to agree with him on many, many things. So thank you, because I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Helena Christensen is her current name. Victoria's Secret model, and let me see if it's Danish. No, Helena Christensen. Maybe that I got the wrong one. I thought the other one's name was Porsakova, and let's see if this woman used to be Porsakova. Victoria's Secret. No, I can't find it here on Wikipedia. Peruvian mother. That doesn't sound like the same one, but it certainly she looks a lot like this. Maybe it's not Porsakova. I just can't find it right now. But I will share that Hitchens is, what, in my opinion, the highest thinking intellectual of the last that I've seen. And I don't know all the professors who are out there giving lectures, but for someone who's out there in the media, he knows he's a polymath. He's someone who remembers things, and he grew up arguing with his brother vehemently, and they both went to good colleges and good prep schools, and they had all of that interest. They were wired for knowledge, and he may have even had a different brain like Einstein. They've tested his brain, and it's different. He's got an extra 20%, I believe, in the frontal lobe for solving equations and doing what the frontal lobe does. So Hitchens may even have a different brain, but he knows literature. He knows history, sociology, politics, the history of wars, the history of famous people, and he's even a kind of a comedian. He does limericks, which are popular in the United Kingdom, and he always lightens tension. No, quite commonly, not always, lightens the tension with humor, and he doesn't let people push him around with things like you're unfair or you're sexist or you're politically incorrect. He says, and your point is, he wants to argue points, not something like when you say, you can't say you're offensive to him. That doesn't mean anything to him. So he's got a skin, I don't know if it's called thick, but it's very rational, where he'll deflect that and he'll just say something like, and your point is. So nobody can use a typical power play like saying that's offensive. Now, you can say that's offensive to me and I'm not ready to have that discussion. If you're at a dinner table, that's fine. And he may say you can get up and leave, or he may change the topic. But if you're in an open forum, which is like a lecture with Q&A or an open debate, he doesn't let that kind of dialogue disrupt it, because it's not where it's designed to be. That's kind of a power play of language from it might have happened in other areas, but it's been very common, let's say, since the 1980s and 90s, this whole political correctness.
Yeah, that's that I call that, when I was watching him, what I saw was a man who was very clear about what he was clear about what he actually said versus what people were trying to say he said. And I find that that happens a lot. And I find that with my coaching clients and even just my personal relationships. People often hear that scattered energy that we were talking about earlier, because we're so busy. People hear what they want to hear. They don't hear what you say sometimes. And so if you're unconscious too, and you're just yak, and you're not conscious of what you're putting out there, it's easier to be bullied and be crazy. But if you're clear in your communication and you're coming from a place of, this is my truth and I'm speaking it, and it's so simple, then it's harder for people to take you off that, or to get you to go into this space and places that you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's not even what I said. So I like that about him. That because people every video I saw, people were trying to slam him. They wouldn't even let him finish, and he just was like calm and cool, no matter what anybody did. I was impressed by that, actually.
Yeah, I've been studying him for 10 years, and I haven't seen all of the videos. And unfortunately, it hits me in the heart, because I really enjoy his discussions. I haven't read his books yet. And but I could, he passed away a few years ago from cancer. He had a lifestyle which was an anti-wellness lifestyle, and he admitted it. He said, he goes out, or he, at the time of his flare, which was the 70s through 5 years ago, so 2004 or 5 years ago, 2014, 2012, he would go out 3 to 4 nights a week to these gala events and dinners and soirees with high-thinking people and important people, and he would do that on such a regular basis, and he would probably be the one that was the life of the party. But there's, again, rich food, rich drinks, smoking. Also, he smoked cigarettes. He always seemed to have one in his hand. So he chose that, and he knew it over wellness, because this is what made him tick, and I don't fault him for that. I'm just saddened that he passed on in his late 60s or 70s a few years ago, and I won't get to hear him on his new topic. So his new topics I'll have to imagine, and maybe we'll take that gift and have conversations at a different level than he did, because he's a extremely high polymath, but maybe we can take some of that wisdom and put it into our own discussions.
Yes. Yeah, I really enjoyed him. So thank you for leading me to him. I think you would also like Dr. Miller. He is a gentleman who does palliative care. Palliative, am I saying that correctly?
Palliative.
Yes. So when he was 17 or 19, he did something stupid and he lost both his limbs and his arm. And so he had his own near-death experience. And now he's a doctor, and he works with people who are dying. Right, and he talks about, a person who smokes or a person who wants to drink. They're not trying to be like give me my drink. They're trying to be in their sensation, and that's how they live. So they just want to live. Maybe that's the last puff. That's the last time their lungs would work. So anyway, my point is, he talks about life we live in our bodies, and it's all about sensations. It's all about touch, feel, smell, and all of that. So he brings it, and I love his work because he brings the dying process into it's living, right? It's just a condensed part of living. And if you extract that, like the end in mind, and you bring it all the way back to where we are now, and you ask yourself, am I living in my body? Most people aren't. Most people are living just of the mind. And that's what's happening to our women. So instead of being deeply, intimately connected with their hormones and what's going on for them hormonally, we are being trained now to be deep thinkers and to be as, just like men, like we're supposed to be rational, and so we're losing something in that. And part of that is we're losing our senses, and women are getting cancer earlier, mothers are dying earlier. There's a consequence that's happening from not honoring a woman's cycle fully. So when I listen to Dr. Miller, what he brings back, and I think this is probably true for men too, because we are beating men up for being men and for having urges, and we're not allowing them to be in their desires and stuff. So there's a whole thing that goes into the female hormones and how it's actually changing our culture, because we're pretending we don't have them, or we're pretending like they're not allowed, and women are really suffering. And when women suffer, everybody suffers.
Yeah. The tribal happiness, in my opinion, and that's the ancients and the modernites, the happiness goes according to how happy, and balanced the woman's personality, demeanor is. And that means she's also kind to herself, because when a woman goes irrational and erratic and has vitriol, physical, verbal abuse, she's doing herself harm. It's not good to go fight or flight or freeze on a regular basis. That's not good for us. We're designed with that capacity for some survival mechanisms to get animals and get away from animals and other predators and other humans, and get out of the way of a falling tree. Yeah, so these are all important, but to have that on a regular basis, that's why, working in a job that's 15 hours a day, 6-7 days a week is not good for us. We're being abused. And so the same thing with this fight, flight, or freeze, you're just getting nailed over and over by this high impulse that fires us up where we don't want to be fired up, at least not on a regular basis. I did find the article. It's called America Made Me a Feminist, June 10th, 2017, by Paulina Poriskova. And so look her up. And she lived in Sweden. When she was 9, she moved from Czechoslovakia. And it's a really neat 2-page article. And then that's accompanying her book release, which came out recently. And boy, smart person and a beautiful person. And she's got a voice, and that voice is roaring right now. So I want to tap into that. What do you think about clicking off now? And we've mentioned some of the problems of this hormonal cycle. Let's stick with women, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that, and then talk about some ideas that you have and that I have, and we'll share some ideas on how we can help women in society in conjunction with this hormone problem. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so we will click off, and this is episode 1. We'll click off and we'll go to episode 2 on female hormones from a historical and a modern context. And I'm Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com, and I am joined by
Christina Marie, Expanded Consciousness LLC. ChristinaMarieWinery.com.
Fantastic. And we'll have that down below this YouTube video. And we are open to your comments, but make sure it's not vitriol, because we are coming at this like a journalist. These are some ideas that we've learned that have come across our desks and our minds recently, and we're open for points of view. So corrections are fine. Share them with openness. Hey, did you ever think that? Have you ever read this person's point of view that says? Don't come at us with the vitriol, because we're out here to share with open hearts, and we're always open to learn with a big hug and with a good discussion. So thank you for being friendly and fair in these comments. Aloha.
Aloha.